I love a story about reincarnation, mainly because it's always creepy and it's always unsettling. And the case of the Pollock twins is no exception to this. The Pollock twins, I think they're one of the most well-known cases of reincarnation, or I guess evidence of reincarnation. And I found it very interesting, so I would like to share it with you. Hi, I'm Yasmin, and I tell stories about true crime, things that are scary or disturbing, so please subscribe and give the video a thumbs up if you enjoy it, and we'll carry on with the rest of the story. On the morning of the 5th of May 1957, 11-year-old Joanna and 6-year-old Jacqueline Pollock were busy getting ready for church. The church that they attended was within walking distance of their home in Hexham, England, and it was a Catholic church that their whole family attended. On this particular day, the girls really wanted to go to church with just them two and another friend named Anthony, and they wanted to walk there without their parents at all and just meet their parents at the church. And due to the proximity of the church and how Joanna was actually quite mature for her age, their parents, Florence and John, felt very comfortable for the kids to go off by themselves and meet them at church later on. Little did they know that this was the last time they were ever going to see their daughters alive. Joanna, Jacqueline and Anthony were happily walking along the footpath, chatting away to each other, when out of nowhere a car basically flew over from the other side of the road, went onto the footpath and crashed straight into the three kids. Joanna and Jacqueline were so badly injured that they died at the scene, and Anthony was rushed off via ambulance but unfortunately passed away on the way to getting to the hospital. The woman that was responsible for this disaster was named Marjorie Wynne, and what's worse is that she saw those kids walking along the footpath and intentionally turned her car to face them and just accelerated at full speed in order to hit them, to harm them or kill them. Marjorie wasn't sober at the time though. She'd actually overdosed on aspirin and epilepsy medication because she was so bitter about the fact that she lost custody of her own children that she decided no one else deserved children either, which is why she did what she did. She was actually arrested and she did end up serving her sentence in a psychiatric institution. Florence and John were absolutely devastated by the sudden loss of their two beautiful daughters. A lot of the time after something so tragic happens, it's very common in marriages that the couples sort of drift apart, and it can even lead to divorce in a lot of cases because people just grieve in different ways, and that's almost what happened to these two. John had a very different way of dealing with his grief compared to Florence, and this is because John was brought up as a Christian, and as a child he came across a book about reincarnation before he converted to Catholicism, and this was the first time he'd ever heard about reincarnation, and he was absolutely fascinated, almost obsessed to a certain point. He would go to bed each night praying that God would somehow show him evidence of reincarnation, but this never happened in his childhood or teenage years. Florence, on the other hand, became a Catholic when she met John, and her religious views go completely against the possibility of reincarnation. So while John was sure that he was going to meet his daughters again, Florence thought that this idea was completely ridiculous and chose to ignore the notion of ever being able to see her daughters again in this lifetime. Florence was in such a deep depression that it felt like things were never really going to get any better, even though it had been months since the girls passed away. And obviously it can take a very long time for people to grieve. There's no right or wrong way to grieve. But her feelings changed when they found out that she was pregnant. The pregnancy was very healthy throughout the entire time, and the couple had regular appointments with their midwives and doctors who assured them that the baby sounded healthy and that there was always one heartbeat heard. On October 4th, 1958, Florence gave birth to surprise twins. Although everything was checked during her pregnancy multiple times, there was only ever the one baby detected. And it depends on the type of twins, but neither of them had twins in the family, but of course you can still get twins. John was not surprised about this in the slightest though. He had a feeling that they were going to have twins before anyone even confirmed it. The twin girls were named Jennifer and Gillian, and one of the first things that their parents noticed about them was the fact that Jennifer had a very unusual fingerprint-shaped birthmark on her waist, and another one that was sort of cutting across her forehead. Her parents, particularly John, thought that this looked strangely similar to the birthmark of her older sister Jacqueline, who also had one on her hip, and she also had a scar that was cutting across her forehead, and that happened because of a fall that she had when she was really little. They didn't really dwell on this though, but John secretly knew that these two girls were the reincarnation of his older daughters. When the twins were 3 months old, the family moved from Hexham to Whitley Bay, and they went back to Hexham for a holiday, I believe, or like a short visit when the girls were about 4 years old. And on their visit there, the girls started to act very, very strange. They started to recall all these landmarks that they had never been to before. They've got no memory of these landmarks, okay? They were born and then they basically left when they were still newborns. They remembered a playground and they could describe exactly what this playground looked like. The playground that they were describing happened to be the playground that their older sister Jacqueline and Joanna loved going to. They were even able to describe the precise location of the school the older sisters attended without having any prior knowledge. There were other strange behaviours that the parents noticed though, particularly when it came to playing with toys. Jennifer and Gillian, out of the blue, one day asked to play with their old toys, and they were able to perfectly describe these toys without ever seeing them before in their lives, and these toys belonged to Joanna and Jacqueline. They were toys that Florence had stored away because she just couldn't get rid of them. Gillian, the older twin, preferred to play with the toys of her older sister, Joanna, while Jennifer would play with Jacqueline's old toys, who was the younger one. At around age 4 is also the time in which their behaviour started to change a bit too. Both of the girls had a very strong fear of cars, and there was this one particular incident where they were walking along a footpath and a car in an alleyway turned on their ignition. Both of them clutched each other, saying that the car was going to get them, and I guess they just got scared by the sound, but it's a bit of an odd reaction. The fear of cars was so bad that they would even reenact the car accident that happened to their older siblings in the privacy of their playroom when they thought nobody was watching. Now, apparently, neither of the parents ever spoke about the accident to either Gillian or Jennifer, but they still somehow knew what happened to their older siblings. The reenactment in the playroom consisted of Jennifer just lying on the floor pretending to be hit by a car with her arms and legs splayed out. Gillian would be cradling her head, and she was saying that blood was coming out of her eyes, which apparently is exactly what happened to Joanna and Jacqueline in real life. This fear of cars was so bad that the girls would actually wake up in the middle of the night covered in sweat from nightmares about cars crashing into them. The story of the Pollock twins really caught the attention of someone named Dr. Ian Stevenson, who was a credible psychiatrist, and he specialized in past lives apparently. I didn't know you could do that, but I think that was his area of research. He also believed in reincarnation, obviously, and he studied the girls until they were about 5 or 6 years old, but this is when their memories also started to fade. Dr. Ian was absolutely convinced that this was a case of reincarnation and that it was very typical for people to forget their past lives as they got older. He also thought that this would have actually been around the age that the younger sister was when she died, which is possibly why their memories started to fade. In the case of the Pollock twins, personally, I don't necessarily think that it's evidence of reincarnation. I reckon that the human mind is very powerful and we're able to fill in gaps, particularly in our childhood. These kids were so young and their parents were still actively grieving the loss of their older siblings. And I think what's more likely to have happened is the fact that the parents, particularly John, who was obsessed with reincarnation already, possibly projected his thoughts onto the girls, which is what led to them coincidentally making up these false memories, or even, an explanation as to why they can remember old toys. Surely the parents must have talked about their older sisters to the twins at some point, and they would have subconsciously just picked up on this or what they said about them. Who knows though, I could be 100% wrong, and this could actually be a true story about reincarnation. I am interested to know what you think though, and whether you believe in reincarnation, and if you do, why do you believe in reincarnation? That is the story of the famous Pollock twins. If you find topics like this interesting, then please subscribe if you haven't already. Give the video a thumbs up. I post every single week, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.